Hello, I'm Hernan Ortiz, the ARM3 statistician in the Northeastern region. This video is part of our cross-region collaborative training, and I will be covering the farm assets and debt sections of the ARM3 questionnaire. We are collecting detailed data on farm assets and debt to get a full financial picture of the farm. We can only do this if we go beyond net farm income of a single year and look at the overall farm wealth by looking at farm equity, farm assets minus debt that is owed. If we do not look at equity, we could be looking at a farm making profits, consider it a positive story, but the farm is otherwise buried in debt. A lender may perceive this farm as a high risk, with difficulty maintaining liquid assets such as savings. This is how the US Secretary of Agriculture will learn how good or bad the agricultural community's financial health is in America. The farmer is the representative voice of operations like them. Collecting information on farm assets and debt helps evaluate whether conditions are favorable for loans. And if no such information is available, lenders will be extra conservative and may not provide loans to farmers who need them and are capable of paying back. Given that loans are often used to build farm wealth, having published data incentivize loans, and this is a good thing. This means that farmers will have more borrowing opportunities. So many of the financial concerns about current agriculture are not just about whether farms make a profit or not in the year, but also about overall farm wealth. And the information is not just used by lenders. It is also used by companies that provide the equipment and farm capital to farmers, who need to know the financial performance of agriculture and the future outlook of agriculture. It is also used by policymakers looking to improve the financial well-being of farmers. The farmer is the representative voice of operations like them, informing us on the conditions of the ag sector. Let's begin talking about assets. When we ask about assets, we are only interested in the fair market value under the current marketing conditions at the reference date specified in the questionnaire, such as January 1st or December 31st of the current year. This fair market value assumes that willing and financially able buyers and sellers exist, and transactions will not involve unusual circumstances, such as an urgent need to sell. The data for these individual components of real estate is not always readily available, but a farmer may have access to it with their business financial statement or with net worth statements when the real estate is tied to loans. When enumerating this section, the respondent needs to understand that we are only including assets owned by the operation. If the assets are owned by the farmer instead of the farm, they do not belong here. They belong in the household section. If the farmer operates in multiple farms and certain assets, such as vehicles, are used by more than one farm, the assets belong to the operation that uses it the most, which may or may not be the farm on the questionnaire label. The farm assets section will cover assets that are related to the farming operation itself, which will be separate from the operator's household assets. One common mistake in the first question occurs with the producer's home being reported twice. Oftentimes, the house the farmer lives in will be reported here as an asset, as well as in the household finances section, which is incorrect. The primary residence can only be counted in one or the other, not both. The all other dwellings only applies if they are owned by the farm. For example, the dwellings may be for fellow operators or workers on the property. Just make sure you do not include secondary or vacation homes unrelated to farm ownership. these other dwellings apply even if they are not occupied. Another highlight of question 1 is item D. Some operators may report orchard trees with the land they are located on, but these items need to be separate. On question 1F, make sure that this value includes all land owned by the operation, even if the land is being rented out and worked by another farmer. It still counts as an asset given the ownership perspective. The next question pertains to trucks, cars, and other machinery. It is important that we use the reference date because the value commonly fluctuates or depreciates over time. Expect higher values on larger operations. Farm type will also play a large factor in this value. For example, a row crop operation is likely to involve more equipment than a cattle operation. If an operation you will expect to own a sizable amount of equipment does not report any, check the expenses section to see if they are leasing their equipment rather than buying it outright. Question 2C asks about stock held in farm cooperatives and the farm credit system. We include value of shares received instead of dividends. A farmer may have this asset if they indicate a loan from farm credit or another cooperative in the debt section. Just like with land and buildings, make sure the vehicles, machinery, and equipment belong to the operation. It is important that we use the reference date because the value may fluctuate or depreciate. Question 3 focuses on crop, livestock, and production inputs that the farm has on hand for 2 dates, January 1st and December 31st of the current year. This allows us to measure net farm income by looking at changes in inventory. Net farm income looks beyond cash receipts for a true measure of income, accounting for crop inventory and livestock inventory adjustments as part of the balance sheet. These adjustments may approximate $10 billion according to the 2023 forecast from the Economic Research Service, so they play a significant role in farm income calculations. Let's go over question 3 in detail. As always, farm type will play a large factor in what to expect here. When accounting for crops, we account for any that are owned and stored, regardless of whether it is stored on or off the farm. The stored crops we consider assets may be harvested by this operation or purchased from others, as long as they are in whole form, not a processed feed. One important thing to double check is whether these crops are stored versus sold. Crops that are already sold and reported in section B should not be double counted here. When accounting for livestock, we also account for any that are owned, regardless of whether they are on the acres operated or off the farm. What we look for is ownership. We don't, for example, include crops or livestock being grown on this farm under a contract. In these cases, the contractor owns the commodities. Another very common issue is reporting the same value in both columns. We shouldn't expect the value to be exactly the same from January 1 to December 31 due to changes in inventory or livestock weights, as well as changes in the market conditions. If truly equal, we need notes so that we can justify keeping identical values. Having a value of 0 in beginning or end of year is possible if a farm is starting or stopping a practice. When reporting the livestock assets, it is very important to check if the data in the assets section reconciles with other sections of the questionnaire and that there is no duplication among sections. Make sure, for example, that positive December 31st livestock asset values are reflected on the livestock section C, column 3, which references December 31 and livestock ownership. For some livestock operations, they may have animals at separate locations based on age. Using a dairy farm as an example, heifers are on one farm. Down the road at the partner's home farm own location is the milk cows and calves, and at the third farm own location are the dry cows. All the animals will be included as assets. There are exclusions to livestock assets. Livestock that is not owned should be excluded, even if located in the farm. We also exclude livestock produced by another operation under a contract because we account for that in Section D. We also exclude pets, except for equine. Arm 3 is not interested in livestock owned for pleasure to count as a livestock farm asset. That is because they are not relevant on measuring farm economy. We report production inputs as assets, such as processed feed, fertilizer, chemicals, fuels. We differentiate inputs on hand and inputs already used. The reason we include inputs already used is because they lead to a potential asset or income. They are referred to as sunk costs. If crops haven't been yet harvested, then the cost is positive, yet the asset is zero. This is misleading unless we include the sunk costs. Remember that sunk costs can also apply to contractees who are waiting to be reimbursed. It is important to be familiar with this terminology, especially if contacting contractees for Arm 3. Then finally, we talk about assets not otherwise specified, which will be liquid and semi-liquid assets. Liquid assets are collected to be summarized by themselves because they serve their own unique purpose as an indicator. Can farmers convert assets to cash at any time of need? Can they do so without losing value in the process? A liquid asset could be cash in hand, saving accounts, while less liquid assets are farm capital and real estate, where farmers will not be able to get cash right away and will lose some value in the process of doing so. If liquid assets on hand are high, farmers will find it easier to meet their financial obligations. We shouldn't often see zero here, since we're talking about cash, bonds, certificate of deposits, savings, checking accounts, government payments due, money owed to the operation outside of the deferred payments section, and many other categories. If respondent states zero, confirm and leave a note. For example, the lines could be blurred between personal and farm finances, with all liquidity belonging to the household of the operator. Debt is recorded only once in the questionnaire. If the loan belongs to an operation that is not the one on the questionnaire label, then we cannot include it. For the screening questionnaire, we are including all loans taken out as long as they have not yet been repaid before January 1 of the current year. This means we can include loans taken in the current year and already repaid. We are also including loans from established line of credit. If any of this applies, then we answer yes for the screening question. For the second question, when determining the total amount repaid on loans, this question is only interested in loans that are taken out during the current year and only seasonal production and other short-term farm loans. These loans may be fully paid off and will still belong here on question 2. Let's talk about the debt table on question 3. For all debt that remains with a balance at the end of the current year. First, the loans from the earlier question about short-term or seasonal loans will apply if not fully repaid by December 31st. Loans taken out after January 1st of the current year that are not fully paid off belong in this table, regardless of whether the loan is short-term. Having a balance of 0 on January 1 is not a disqualifier. You just enter as 0 for that column. However, if the balance is 0 because the loan got paid off in the current year, then it doesn't belong here. You might be wondering why we don't collect paid off loans from earlier years. We are measuring debt to equity ratios. This section is about the ability to pay off existing debt. In this case, it got paid off, so it is not relevant. The debt table is shown here. This table asks a number of characteristics pertaining to the loans taken out by the farm, including balances owed, interest rates, and more. The questionnaire allows enough space for 5 loans. If greater than 5 loans, pick the 5 largest loans first, then sum up the December 31 balance from all remaining loans in question 4. Now I'm going to go column by column. For the lender type code, which is column 1, we don't have to get to specifics, just the code that corresponds to the kind of lender. If a farm has 2 loans from the same type of lender, we can reuse the code for multiple lines. Be careful around these lender type codes. Do not go by keyword alone. For example, there is a code for FSA. However, this code is only used for direct loans from the agency. Farmers may think they have to select FSA because FSA has lending functions. But if the lender is not FSA itself, we can't categorize it as an FSA loan. Another example is borrowing against a life insurance policy. This doesn't mean one is borrowing from the company associated with that policy. For other categories, unpaid bills are treated as other debts. Then we measure the balance owed at the beginning and end of year. For the end of the year, it can never be 0. If true, then the entire line must be taken out. You may be wondering what that reference to unpaid interest is all about. The questionnaire here means delinquent interest. You do not need to calculate how much interest is owed for the remainder of the loan, just the principal. Next is interest rate, reported with 2 decimal places. We collect the interest rate on December 31 in case the rate is not fixed. It is possible to have 0% interest rate, common with short-term loans as a special incentive for a buyer, and also common for loans among family members. Please write us a note whenever interest rate is 0 so that we can justify this. For loan types, we are entering the code based on length, whether the loan is for real estate, and if so, if the loan is for the producer's house, if the operation owns it, of course. Loans of less than a year are often referred to as production loans, which are seasonal loans to finance production, then repaid after sales. We can also call this a line of credit. If a respondent struggles to pick a code, first, ask if loan is real estate or mortgage. If real estate, determine if loan is for producer's house, which is code 4, or not, which is code 3. If not real estate, then determine length of loan. If less than 12 months, then it will be code 1. If more than 12 months, then it will be code 2. Column 6 is next. We simply enter the 4-digit year that the loan was obtained or refinanced. The next column is the original term of the loan, whether it is the original loan or a refinance loan. The minimum number of years we can enter is 1, so you may need to round up for seasonal loans. Finally, we use column 8 to determine percent of loan used for the farm operation. Normally 100%, but this is here to make sure to exclude any debt not associated with farm operation. If the percent is 0, then the entire line needs to be removed. We will now go through a few examples related to the farm debt section of the questionnaire. For each loan scenario, we will show where the loan belongs to the questionnaire. To make these brief, we are using these to highlight a particular question or column, not cover all details needed for the 8 columns. A new loan is used to finance farmland secured with farm assets with a term of 30 years. While the loan was taken out in the current year, question 2 does not apply because question 2 is exclusive to seasonal production and other short-term farm loans. The item 3 table applies. The new debt will have no January 1 balance, but there will be a balance for the end of year on column 3. The next loan is used to finance farm equipment secured with farm assets. We use the item 3 table. For the interest rate, if it is variable, we enter what the rate was at the end of the current year, not the annual average. The next example is a 1-year seasonal production loan to buy seed that was taken out in the current year, but not fully repaid by the end of the year. We have to answer question 2 as it relates to seasonal production and other short-term loans. We enter the amount that was repaid during the current year. Question 2 then instructs you to record any outstanding balances in item 3. So we go to the item 3 table, we enter 0 for January 1 balance and a positive balance for December 31. The next example is another seasonal short-term loan, but one that is fully repaid during the current year. We do not need to fill out the item 3 table, given that there is 0 balance on December 31 of the current year. However, we still need to answer question 2 as the loan that was taken out during the current year was repaid. This last example is a loan completely unrelated to the farm operation, a personal vehicle or vacation.
Thanks for tuning in to our knowledge check regarding farm debt. Let's get into it. Farmer Casey has debt. The farm operation owed $196,000 at the end of the year. During the year, they repaid $75,000 worth of loans, including $30,000 that was taken out during the year. How would we complete item 2? Would we A, check the none box, B, enter $30,000, C, enter $75,000, or D, enter $271,000? Feel free to pause for a second until you have an answer. Let's go over the answer. Please pay close attention to the question itself. What was the total amount repaid on farm business loans taken out during the year? We're only interested in those new loans that were repaid. The amount owed by the operation at the end of the year would appear in item 3's table and should not be included here. Older loans should not be included here, so the full $75,000 should not be included. $30,000 represents what was taken out during the reference year and then repaid. So the answer is B, $30,000.
Assets and debt make up just a few pages of the questionnaire, but play a vital part in the story of farm financial health. Data from these sections will help researchers to determine farm solvency and find solutions to prevent bankruptcy in the farm sector. A few reminders before we wrap up today. Always remember to check for duplication among assets that may be reported in other sections. Also, have a good knowledge of types of production and liquid assets to provide the farmer examples of what may qualify on their farm. Thank you for participating on the ARM3 training this year, and good luck during data collection.